Welcome back, class. This is the second chapter of Unit 4, Chapter 12 on Social Psychology. Please note that I'll be using a slightly older presentation for this online review of the material. I will have these slides available for you in conjunction with the posting of this video. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Social psychology, in essence, asks the question, how do individuals respond to other people? In this second chapter of Unit 4, we'll examine several aspects of social psychology. As we've done for the chapters this term, we will begin with 10 statements that are either true or false in order to introduce you to some of the topics in this chapter. Alright, let's get started. Number 1. Compared with people in Western countries, those in East Asian cultures are more sensitive to situational influences on behavior. True or false? That is a true statement. As we'll see as we go through the material, our cultures do have a great deal of impact on how it is that we perceive things and attribute causes to people's behavior. Number 2. To change people's racist behaviors, we first need to change their racist attitudes. Is that true or false? That is actually a false statement. As we go through this material, we'll see some of the reasons as to why that is and determine how there are other ways in which people's racist behaviors or attitudes may be changed. Number 3. Chimpanzees are more likely to yawn after observing another chimp yawn. True or false? That is a true statement. Number 4. Most people would refuse to obey an authority figure who told them to hurt an innocent person. True or false? That is a false statement. We'll see in some classic experiments by Stanley Milgram on obedience what situations come into play when someone will hurt someone that is innocent, an innocent person. There are going to be many factors involved in that, as we'll discuss. Number 5. Studies of college and professional athletic events indicate that home teams win about 6 in 10 games for most sports. Is that true or false? That statement is true. Number 6. Individuals pull harder in a team tug of war than when they pull in a one-on-one tug of war. True or false? That is a false statement. Number 7. The higher the morale and harmony of a social group, the more likely are its members to make a good decision. Surprisingly, that statement is false. Number 8. Researchers project that, other things being equal, global warming of 4 degrees Fahrenheit, about 2 degrees centigrade, would induce tens of thousands of additional assaults and murders in the United States alone. True or false? That is a true statement. Number 9. From research on liking and loving, it is clear that opposites attract. True or false? That statement is false. And finally, number 10. We are less likely to offer help to a stranger if other bystanders are present. We are less likely to offer help to a stranger if other bystanders are present. True or false? That statement is true. As we go through this material, we'll see some of the reasons why these statements are true or false. So, looking at Chapter 12 overview, we ask certain types of things. How we think in relation to other people. How other people influence not only our thinking, but our actions. And how we treat each other, relate to each other. So, looking at how other people influence not only our thinking, but our actions, we'll look at such topics as conformity, obedience, group behavior. And how we treat each other and relate to each other, we'll be looking at such things as prejudice, attraction, aggression, altruism, conflict, and peacemaking. So let's start first by looking a little bit more deeply into this thing called social thinking. So social thinking covers a whole bunch of topics. So we'll be looking at some of these as we go through this lecture. Topics will include such things as attributions, which also includes the fundamental attribution error. We'll also be looking at attitudes and actions affecting each other. We'll look at persuasion, peripheral and central routes to persuasion, a phenomenon known as foot in the door, and how role-playing can affect our attitudes and behavior. And we'll also look at the concept of cognitive dissonance and how actions have the ability to affect our beliefs. So, first let's talk about attribution. Everybody, when you are involved in anything and you see people behaving in some ways, in certain ways, we want to attribute. That is, we want to identify causes. We want to ask ourselves, why is it this person did that or is behaving this way? So attribution is a conclusion about the cause of an observed behavior or event. We're looking for causes. We want to identify them. Attribution theory. We explain others' behavior with two types of attributions. The first is a situational attribution. Factors outside the person doing the action, such as peer pressure. So the behavior is caused by an outside factor. A situational attribution. Not because of who the person is, but because of what situation the person's in. The other is the dispositional attribution. The person's stable and enduring traits, personality, ability, and emotions. With dispositional attribution, we're basically saying the following. The person behaved this way simply because that's who they are. It's a personal trait, psychological characteristics of the individual that cause the behavior, as opposed to situational factors outside the person causing them to behave the way that they did. With all that we have learned about people so far in this course, you should make pretty good guesses about the nature of other people's behavior, right? We especially those raised in Western individualistic cultures like ours. An individualistic culture is a culture where we see the importance of the individual. We see it in our movies. A stranger comes to town. One person fights City Hall. That all points to that one individual and the power of that individual. That is what an individualistic culture like ours really finds very advantageous and appreciates a great deal. But because of that, we also have the error that comes along with it. And that error is referred to as the fundamental attribution error. So, you can find the error in the following comment. I noticed the new guy tripping and stumbling as he walked in. How clumsy can you be? Does he never watch where he's going? Obviously, that statement made by this individual about some other person's behavior would tend to suggest they think it's the personal characteristics of the individual that causes him to be so clumsy. Not situational factors, but the individual. What is the error? Well, think about it this way. The next day, hey, they need to fix this rug. I tripped on it on the way in. Not everyone tripped. Well, not everyone had a test that day and their cell phone was buzzing. So the idea here is this. That person that we blame as being a clumsy individual, well, maybe they weren't clumsy. Maybe we should not have attributed their clumsy-like behavior to personal characteristics of the individual. Maybe it was a situational cause. Maybe there was something wrong with the rug. So let's look at what we mean by this fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error, when we go too far in assuming that a person's behavior is caused by their personality. It is the person's fault for their behavior. Their personal traits causes the behavior that we see. We tend to go too far in assuming that in Western cultures. We think behavior demonstrates a trait. We tend to emphasize the situational attribution less than the personal one. So we tend to overemphasize the dis or the dispositional attribution and underemphasize the situational attribution. That is our problem, and that is our FAE, or our fundamental attribution error. Another item that we want to talk about is going to be attitudes and actions. An attitude, and we all have them, attitudes, feelings, ideas, and beliefs that affect how we approach and react to other people, objects, and events. Attitudes, by definition, affect our actions. We shall see later that our actions can also influence our attitudes. So basically, think about it this way. A bad attitude toward a situation or a group of people isn't just a bad mood. It's a mindset that makes us likely to react negatively to that situation or that group, depending on our attitude that we have about them, the feelings and ideas and beliefs that we have about that event or that person or that object. So our attitudes can sort of taint a lot of things when it comes to our interactions with people. Now, let's talk about another aspect of social thinking, persuasion. We always want to persuade people. You want to persuade your group of friends when you go out to lunch or something, where to go, what restaurant to go to. So persuasion is a very powerful thing that we do on a day-to-day basis. We always want to influence people. We want to persuade them to do this, that, or the other thing. So two cognitive pathways to affect our attitudes. So we're trying to see what influences our attitudes. Remember, our attitudes are feelings and ideas and beliefs that affect how we approach and react to other people, objects, and events. So these two pathways are the central route persuasion, going directly through the rational mind, influencing attitudes with evidence and logic. My product has been proven more effective. That is a central route to persuasion. It could be based on logic and rationality. You're using the mind to influence people's attitudes about things. That is the central route to persuasion. But that's not the only route to persuading other people to have their attitudes influenced. The other one is the peripheral route of persuasion. Changing attitudes by going around the rational mind and appealing to fears, desires, and associations. People who buy my product are happy, attractive, and so on. That is an emotional appeal, something that they would like to be. We're not talking about the logic or rationality of whether or not my product is good or effective. We're talking about their feelings. We're getting around the effectiveness of our particular product in this sample. So let's talk a little bit more about these. With the central route of persuasion, you have to convince people through logic and rationality to change their attitudes about stuff. With the peripheral route of persuasion, what we have to do is make them feel somehow. Go around the rational mind. We're doing everything but trying to use a logical argument to persuade somebody, to have them change their attitudes about something. You may have heard of the expression before, changing people's hearts and minds. Well, that phrase really has this in mind. When we change somebody's hearts and minds, we're talking about changing the heart. That means we're trying to make an emotional appeal. We want to influence them and change their attitude through emotionality. When we say we want to win their minds, that means we want to use logic and rationality to change the way it is that they may have and hold attitudes about certain things. So winning hearts and minds is a great thing. But sometimes you can't do it. Sometimes we need to understand that it may be very difficult for us to persuade somebody using the central route. It takes a lot of effort on the people who are trying to be persuaded. They have to focus, pay attention, they have to know things. So sometimes we may find it easier to go through the peripheral route of persuasion, making them feel a certain way, making them feel important or feel to get their emotionality up. By doing this, we can still persuade people. The persuasion, however, may not be as long lasting if we did it through the central route, so we may have to continually stoke the fire, so to speak, in order to make sure people are maintained with that particular type of persuasion, that we want to maintain their fears, maintain their desires, and things of that nature, because it doesn't last as long as a central route to persuasion. Now, let's look at one other aspect: social attitudes. Social thinking, looking at attitudes affect our actions and when. How do they affect our actions? First, we need to have the following. When do attitudes influence how we behave? One, external influences are minimal. Okay, so we have an attitude about something and we don't have anybody going against us. So let's look at examples. I feel like, that's an attitude, eating McDonald's and I will do something. All right, that's your behavior. There are no nutritionists here telling you not to. So it's not your mom's voice or your grandma's voice saying, this is bad food, you shouldn't do it. So there are not any external influences there. They're very minimal. So your attitude about something will, in this turn, dictate your behavior. The attitude is stable. I've enjoyed their food for quite a while. You have a great long history of eating at McDonald's. Therefore, you have sort of a stability when it comes to your feelings, your attitudes about that particular fast food restaurant. The attitude is specific to the behavior. It's so easy to get the food when I have a craving. So let's review real quickly. There's no one telling you shouldn't eat there. No nutritionist or no grandma or something. You've enjoyed their food in the past for some time. It's stable. And now the attitude is specific to a behavior. You know you can go get that food to fulfill that craving that you have. And finally, the attitude is easily recalled. It's easy to remember how good it is when I drive by that big sign every day. You see the golden arches. You see them everywhere. Therefore, it is something that is easily and readily available in your mind. Therefore, this is when attitudes will affect our actions or our behavior. When we have little or minimal external influences, the attitude is stable, the attitude is specific to a behavior, and the attitude is easily recalled. But the other things can happen too. Actions can affect attitudes. If attitudes direct our actions, can it work the other way round? How can it happen that we can take an action which in turn shifts our attitudes about that action? Here are some of the examples. Through three social cognitive mechanisms: the foot in the door phenomena, the effects of role playing or playing a role, and this thing we'll refer to as cognitive dissonance. All these have a large role in having the ability to have our behavior influence our attitudes. And we'll pick up on that when we come back.